here. And if we were really honest with ourselves, we would come to realize that our souls are starving for this connection that we have here, for this harmony and peace and joy and sharing. So Sunday after Sunday, a subtle pull in our hearts brings us here, and we are welcomed with no questions asked. We are brought into the comfort of familiar faces and some new faces. We're all kindred spirits. And we become radicals. Each of us quietly yet fiercely radical in our refusal to be a part of the division. And so we come together from different backgrounds and beliefs, and we celebrate and honor our differences and learn from each other. I believe many of you, like me, can feel within our hearts, subtle though it may be, that during these precious times together, the world is made whole and beautiful again. And we are made whole and beautiful again. Our inner spark is kindled again. And when we leave this sanctuary, this safe harbor of sanity and presence, we are ready to meet the days ahead with a precious and noble gift tucked in our hearts. And now I am really happy to introduce our guest, who most of you know, Reverend Andrew Millard, Ph.D. He, then, they, has served the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Peninsula and Newport News since 2010. Born and raised in England, where we get to enjoy that wonderful voice. He studied physics and then theology, and now lives in Gloucester. Let us welcome him as we reflect together on the possible futures of religion, not as mere speculation, but as an invitation to listen, to imagine, and to discover what meaning, purpose, and community may look like in the years to come.
Good morning. Sorry. It's good to be with you again, and greetings from the UU Fellowship of the Peninsula in Newport News. I'm excited to say that after our move into a much bigger facility in February, we'll complete our transition when we start holding services in our newly refurbished sanctuary this December. And sometime next year, we will hold a building dedication as well, and you're all invited to come to that when it happens. Whenever Unitarian Universalists come together, it is to grow the beloved community. With every smile and kind word, every act of service and generosity, we build connections, threads in the great web that sustains us and holds us together. For only in community can we truly make a difference and bring our vision into being. This poem is called Remembering the Future by my colleague Julian Soto from their wonderful book, Spilling the Light, Meditations on Hope and Resilience, published by our UUA's Skinner House Books. Can we develop the skill of remembering the future? Can we commit to building the community that will extend into a time that we only know by memory because it will outlast us? Memorize the compass points of the day yet to come, the truth, the love, the fire, the endless yes of the horizon. Shake the scales from your imagination. Reach, stretch, rise. There is no more time for pretending that everything can be all right without your care, without your attention. You can mourn, grief being more real at times than the promise of the sunrise, more real than a piece of the moon that by inconstant silver turns disappears. And yet, while we may mourn changes, losses, deceptions, and betrayals, beneath the ash we find the ember. We weep, and then, as we have learned from labor movements, we organize. Remember the day toward which we gather, the tomorrow toward which we advance. It is with your actions today that you engage that muscle memory, that sense of smell, the ragged velvet feel of a day that you have never lived. It is also your day. Remember it well. In a service at the UUFR some years ago, the text for my sermon was John Lennon's song Imagine, specifically the line, "And no religion too." I noted it's one of the more popular non-hymnal songs sung in UU congregations, and yet there is that moment of weirdness when we find ourselves singing in church about imagining no religion. In that sermon, I talked about three things. First, why people might want to imagine no religion. Second, what might be said in defense of religion. And third, why singing in church about imagining no religion might not be so weird after all. For that, I talked about the idea for Mahayana Buddhism that religion is a vehicle. In other words, it exists to get us somewhere. So imagine you're on a journey and you come to a river. You need to get to the other side, but there's no bridge and the river's too deep to wade through and too wide to swim across. But you find a boat and you use it to get across the river. Once you've made it to the other side, though, do you still need the boat? No. The boat was a means to the end of getting across the river. And now that you've crossed the river, you don't need it anymore. You need to continue your journey, and trying to drag the boat with you would be a problem. Or worse, just sitting in the boat and never continuing your journey at all. In Mahayana Buddhism, religion is that boat. You need it to get you to where you need to go. And once you're there, you don't need it anymore. Now, after that sermon, word got back to me that some people were excited about how they thought I said we don't need religion anymore. I guess it's my fault because I didn't say where it is that we need religion to get us to, and that we're not there yet. In Buddhism, it's awakening and liberation from suffering. In Unitarian Universalism, it's the beloved community. Are we there yet? No, clearly not. So getting rid of religion now makes as much sense as getting rid of the boat while you're halfway across the river. That did get me thinking, though, about how we get from here to there, from now to the beloved community that John Lennon asks us to imagine, and how religion itself might have to change. One place to find visions of the future is science fiction. Some of it, to be sure, is simply about spaceships and lasers and robots. But good science fiction is about what it means to be human and how we can better understand ourselves by imagining ourselves in different times and places. When I started thinking about it, though, I realized that most science fiction, if it imagines a future humanity going from Earth to the stars, pretty much ignores religion. Star Trek is a good example. Plenty of alien races have religions or spiritual practices, but for humans, religion seems to be a thing of the past, like money. One outlier on the other end of the spectrum is the 90s TV show Babylon 5, which, like Star Trek, is set in the 23rd century. Babylon 5 is a space station, where humans and alien races meet. It's like the United Nations in space. In one episode, Babylon 5 hosts a festival where each race is to exhibit its dominant world religion. Some of them are calm and subdued. Some are loud and boisterous. And the space station's human commander spends a lot of the episode wondering just what he can share from Earth. So can we imagine other options for religion in the future between Gene Roddenberry's secular humanism and the current religious landscape simply continuing for another 300 years? Well, of course we can, but I came across one that I found particularly compelling during my sabbatical last year. I discovered on my bookshelf that I had a copy of Frank Herbert's 1965 novel Dune, or for Americans, Dune. I think I picked it up decades ago, but with a new movie out a few years before and the second just come out, I thought I'd read the book itself. Now, if you haven't read any of the books or seen any of the movies, don't worry, there won't be any spoilers. Rather, what I'm going to talk about comes from Appendix 2, the religion of Dune. And religion is a big part of the story. While it is set some 20,000 years in the future, and there are spaceships, and humanity has spread across the galaxy, that's really just the backdrop of the story, which is much more about politics, religion, and ecology. Space travel merely provides the motivation for the story, in that the desert planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, is the sole source of a substance that spaceship navigators need to make space travel safe. This puts Arrakis and its politics, religion, and ecology firmly at the center of the story. Another hallmark of typical science fiction, as I said, is lasers, but the story doesn't involve them much either, because when the beam from a laser weapon hits the type of force field used for shielding, there's a massive explosion. So nobody uses lasers. As for robots, and the reason why humans navigate through space rather than computers doing it, the story is set some 10,000 years after a violent century-long struggle known as the Butlerian Jihad, a great revolt against computers, thinking machines, and conscious robots. Now, this wasn't because the robots themselves turned evil, or because artificial intelligence came to the logical conclusion that the only way to reach peace was to destroy humanity. There are more than enough stories and movies about those. Rather, as Herbert himself made clear, when people turned their decision-making over to machines, the creators of those machines became a new class of technocrats, effectively controlling everybody else to the point of enslaving them. Something for us to think about now. In the aftermath of the Butlerian Jihad, many people took the opportunity to reevaluate their religions, particularly given how they had used fear as a means of control in many of them. There were interfaith meetings on the subject, from which came the Commission of Ecumenical Translators. This met on Old Earth. Every faith with more than 1 million followers was represented, and they quickly came to an agreement on their goal: to put an end to the idea that any single religion could exclusively possess the truth. Let me note here that this is something that Unitarian Universalists have known for a long time. From one of the foundation stones of liberal religion, that revelation is not sealed, to the naming of pluralism as one of our religious values. The Commission of Ecumenical Translators continued its work, slowly and not without pushback, and after 7 years, they unveiled a book of truths that they had compiled from all of the different religions, what they called the Orange Catholic Bible. Another note, when I was still a relatively new UU, I heard of a number of people, and not only ministers, who would collect, print out some photocopies of religious texts and poems and other writings they found particularly meaningful, comforting, and inspiring. They would punch binder holes in these papers and assemble them into what they called a loose leaf Bible. Finally, in this bit of prehistory to Doon, the Orange Catholic Bible was first rejected by many religious groups, some of whom edited it to put back in their own exclusiveness. But over the course of 90 generations, it became the most important religious text across the galaxy, fulfilling the final words of the chair of the Commission of Ecumenical Translators. Religion must remain an outlet for people who say to themselves, I am not the kind of person I want to be. Religion must never sink into an assemblage of the self-satisfied. If that isn't a UU sentiment, I don't know what is. And no, in case you're wondering, Frank Herbert was not a UU. He was raised Catholic, but he wasn't part of any religious group as an adult. For all that this happens on a galactic scale, the evolution of religion that Herbert envisioned seems much more realistic to me than religion either disappearing from human society entirely or simply continuing as it currently is. I also find it compelling because if you were to get a group of UU scholars together to synthesize a truly world religion for humanity, I think the broad strokes would be the same. First, it was Unitarian minister and theologian James Luther Adams who identified the 5 smooth stones that are the foundation of any liberal religion. As he wrote in the 1940s, revelation is continuous. Meaning has not been fully captured, and the book of truth has not been closed. In other words, there's always more to learn, to appreciate, to understand, and no single religion has a monopoly on truth because truth is not limited. 80 years later, we have declared that one of the shared values of Unitarian Universalism, represented in the picture down to the bottom left, as pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Second, Unitarian Universalism draws on many sources of inspiration, not just the Christianity of our Universalist and Unitarian forebears, but many different sacred, secular, and scientific understandings, all in dialogue with our own reason and experience. As UUs, we have the covenants we create. We have no creeds, and we have an unlimited canon. I've said before that the entire Library of Congress is available to us as scripture, and any text, poem, song, movie, or other media that offers us meaning, comfort, and inspiration can be considered part of our Bible. Third, understanding religion as a vehicle. We know that we're not here just so that we can pat ourselves on the back for being good religious liberals. Rather, we're here because we know that there's room for improvement in ourselves, in our families, in our society, and in the world. It's why another one of our shared UU values is named transformation at the top in light blue. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. This is reflected in your covenant here too, when it refers to searching for truth, striving for kindness, and promoting justice. Those are pathways to transformation. If you're not willing to be changed, you cannot do them. Unitarian Universalism has a compelling vision of what human religion can be, not just in a few centuries or the distant future, but now. We embrace pluralism. We have an unlimited canon of meaning, comfort, and inspiration, and our transformation is already underway. And the power of imagination is such that if we can imagine what could be in the future, if we can imagine the beloved community, if we can imagine the kingdom of heaven here on earth, then we don't have to leave it to the future. We can start working on it now. When I lived in San Diego at the end of the last millennium, I was part of a science fiction club that included local college professor and award-winning author Vernor Vinge. His main claim to fame was that he had popularized the concept of a technological singularity, a point in time when technological advancement becomes so rapid that it's impossible to imagine what human society will be like beyond it. It's a concept that has had a lot of scientists and philosophers arguing about it, particularly now that large language models are becoming so good at mimicking human conversation, even if they occasionally say things like, the best way to keep toppings from sliding off a pizza is to glue them on. Or perhaps there could be a different type of singular event, a collective awakening of human consciousness, a critical mass of worldwide beloved community, or something inconceivable that simply changes everything. Whatever it is, we can't imagine what's beyond it. And perhaps those beyond it won't understand what it was either. It simply changed everything. I don't know about you, though, but I don't plan on simply sitting back and waiting for it to happen. I reject the claim of our Unitarian forebears that the progress of humanity is inevitably onward and upward forever. When James Luther Adams identified as another foundation stone of liberal religion, that the human and cosmic resources for meaningful personal and social transformation justify ultimate optimism, he wasn't talking about wishful thinking. Rather, it's up to us to make good use of those human and cosmic resources to bring about transformation. The arc of the moral universe does not bend toward justice unless we apply the weight of our souls to bend it. So can you imagine it? Can you imagine us bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice? Can you imagine how we might use human and cosmic resources to transform ourselves and our world? Can you imagine building on the foundation stone of liberal religion and working with our shared UU values to grow the beloved community? Can you imagine creating a future of human flourishing that will extend into a time that we only know by memory because it will outlast us? Come, let's imagine it together. May it be so.
Going back to your reading, to remember the future.
Yes.
Are you saying that the past is our stargate to the future?
No, I think what Julian is getting at in that is that we can't make the world what we want it to be unless we can actually imagine it more than just generalities. Before you can change something, you have to have a pretty good idea of how it is that you want to change it. This came up in my congregation some years ago when we were going to do a capital campaign. And this was during the pandemic, so it was pretty unprecedented, and we had no idea how it was going to go. But we had a stewardship consultant come in, and he did the usual meeting with various people in the congregation to give us an estimate of what he thought we could raise for our capital campaign, which we exceeded, by the way. And one of the things he was trying to get out of people was not tell me about the congregation, tell me a story about the congregation. Don't just tell me about it as if it was a picture on the wall that you were describing. Tell me how you've actually lived as part of the congregation. Tell me what you imagine the congregation becoming, because stories are much more powerful than simple descriptions. And I think that's part of what he was trying to get at. He was trying to see, if we could explain not just that we wanted a bigger building because we needed more space, but if we could actually imagine ourselves living in that bigger space and becoming the congregation that we wanted to be.
Thanks, Andrew. I thought that was really wonderful and interesting. To me, the big division in religion is whether people believe there's some higher power external to us, whether it's God or however we want to describe it, or whether we're basically on our own in the universe and we're finding that higher power or inspiration within, internal to us. So here is a possible transformative event. Someday, scientists are going to be very convincing about the origin of the universe. They're going to have a theory, and it's not going to include a divine creator. It's going to be some version of quantum physics and spontaneous creation of subatomic particles or something you could imagine. When that happens and it becomes so well established, then I think people are going to either have a complete crisis of faith or something. It's going to be transformative somehow. And whether it ends up being transformative in a positive way or not, we'll just have to see. We might not be around at that time, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
One of the ways that I think about this is that there is a continuum. It's not a simple binary. There is what is traditional theism, that there is a God who is somehow separate from the material universe and acts in that universe in certain ways. To one side of it, there is deism, which is what a lot of our founding fathers believed, that there was a creator, but after that, the creator left the universe alone. On the other side of it, there is something called panentheism, which imagines the universe, the natural world, and divinity not as separate, but the natural world, the universe, is part of that bigger divinity. And then there is pantheism, where divinity and the universe are identified with one another. And that can be from a divinity that has some sense of will and action, like in theism, or it could be simply the fact that this is how we respond to the natural world, with feelings of awe and wonder that might traditionally be attached to a divinity, what is called religious naturalism. But the thing is, that spectrum is not a line with ends, because some of the ideas in quantum mechanics to try and explain what's called the anthropic principle, which is that this universe is such that it gave life to intelligent life like us who could be here to see the universe. And if various constants like the charge and mass of the electron were slightly different, intelligent life would not be possible, maybe not even life at all. So the constants that define the natural world have to be such for us to be here to see them that can produce beings who are here to see them, which is a bit of a circular argument, but there isn't a clear resolution to that. One of the explanations for it, though, that I think Stephen Hawking and Kip Thorne or somebody like that came up with was the fact that maybe when black holes form, they're not just bottomless pits of gravity, but in some way they actually create new universes. And universes that are more likely to produce black holes that can produce other universes are also universes that are more likely to form intelligent life that can then ask questions about that universe. So it's almost like there's a natural selection process for universes producing other universes, in which case you can go from pantheism, which is that the universe itself is a form of divinity, to that universe creating other universes, so that in the parent universe, that is like deism for the new universe that has been formed. So it's not a line with ends, it's a circle. So you don't have to be in one particular place on the spectrum because it's not either or. There is a continuum there. And for instance, I know a number of Christian ministers who, if they were being completely honest with you, would say they are not actually theists. They are panentheists or pantheists. I know that it's assumed that the dominant understanding of God out there is that it's some sort of personal God who does things against the laws of nature. I'm not convinced that is the dominant understanding of God, at least not with people who have had some religious education.
I like your symbolism of the church or religion being the boat to cross the river.
Yeah.
However, from the standpoint of vision and planning, are we sure we want to cross that river? Before you can do any planning, you have to develop a vision as to where you want to be.
Yes.
And that is a challenge, not only for humanity, but it is a challenge for simple little churches all over the country.
Yeah. And if we're going to get everyone across the river, which is what universalism says we need to do, then there needs to be some general agreement that the other side of the river is more desirable than the side that we're currently on, which I think most UUs, given the state of the world, particularly what's been going on this year, we would agree that this side of the river isn't so great anymore. And we need to find a way to get to the other side where, as far as UUs are concerned, that's the beloved community.
I'm just going to do a little shameless plug. This was wonderful. If you're not doing anything next Sunday,
Preaching this.
I have prepared a talk based on speculative fiction about that other side, and a combination of writings from people of all genders. So men, women, non-binary, transgender people imagining the beloved community, whether through reimagining history or imagining out into the future. And there's some amazing guidance out there.
There is. Another book that I could have mentioned that I didn't because it didn't quite fit was books by Octavia Butler, particularly the Parables series. And now there are all sorts of people, given what Butler sort of predicted, or at least wrote about in the parable of the sower. They're saying Octavia was right, because when she wrote that book, a lot of what is going on in 2025 is what she described. Not quite as bad, but it's definitely a warning of what could happen if we keep going the way we're going.
I agree with what a lot of people are saying about, from a science point of view, reductionism into the material world is driving people away from the consciousness that they haven't been able to figure yet. But I'm also a firm believer, studying self-realization since I was about 6 years old, diving deep into my consciousness, that other people, and it's going to be part of our human nature to really discover that again.
Yeah.
And once we dive into the consciousness, it's like you said, everything is true. It all is. And wherever you want to go and whatever you want to do, you can feel that. And I believe that's what the future is. If we don't get all caught up in our left brain and saying, okay, we're going to divide it down into the simplest portion of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's particularly true when it comes to climate change. I mean, we've known for decades what it is we need to do to prevent catastrophic climate change. It's not the fact that we don't know enough. It's a question of will and spirit as to whether we will do anything about it. And that's the role that I think religion in particular needs to play in terms of providing that motivation. Because if it was simply a matter of knowing what causes climate change and what we could do to prevent it, we would have done it already. Well, thank you, everybody. I look forward to talking to you more about this.